PS4 exclusives God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn incredibly generated almost $1 billion in combined revenue. I dive into the figures and the ramifications for the PlayStation and Xbox business models. Some amazing data has come out about Sony and their PlayStation games business, and it reveals details of why they keep making these exclusive games. So before we get started, please remember to like, share with anybody else that you think will be interested, and subscribe. So the PlayStation Group marketing manager, a guy named TJ Kasunji, he's been with the company with Sony 17 years, and he posted his online profile. Now the role of the group marketing manager, it's a very senior role, if not the most senior manager role for all of marketing. It means he's in charge of products and their positioning in the marketplace. He raises awareness about them through marketing campaigns. It's a very senior role, and the gist of it is he has to help sell more products. So what's interesting is on his profile, first of the minor details, is that he has been the senior brand manager behind the campaign for 4 of Sony's biggest PS3 launches: Killzone 2, Uncharted 2, Killzone 3 and Uncharted 3. And he says that all launches exceeded the business plan, their predictions for what they were going to sell, by 20% or more within their first 5 weeks. So what this indicates is that the games that they were making from the PS3 generation, these exclusives, they were, from that period in time, they were selling more than what PlayStation had planned for. So they were exceeding expectations. But that's a while back. More interesting is what he said about Horizon Zero Dawn. He said he launched the most successful new first-party IP with Horizon Zero Dawn, and he successfully delivered 8 million plus units globally of digital sales, which was 35% of the total sales, and this exceeded revenue targets and won multiple Best New IP awards. And he said that it generated 400 million in revenue, an amazing amount. Bear in mind, this is not net profit. From this figure, there is also the expense of actually developing the game and marketing the game. So development costs for the game, no exact figures have been released, but it could be something like between 30 to perhaps $60 million. So just looking at that, what we see there is Horizon Zero Dawn as a new IP, new IPs, intellectual properties, people are not familiar with them, and because of that, they're a harder sell. So this was Sony's biggest new IP of the generation. Sony did release quite a few different IPs, so that's pretty amazing in itself. And that's all in the first year from launch. And what's more amazing is the entry for God of War. He said it exceeded revenue targets and it grossed 500 million in revenue as of the end of 2019. It set records for the highest year one, and digital sales were 10 million plus units, with a 40% digital split. 40% of the units sold were digital, and that was a total of 10 million units, so the other 60% would have been approximately 25 million units. So what we can gather from all of this is that these two high-profile IP from Sony, these two first-party exclusives, have been selling really well, and they've made a lot of revenue for Sony. Again, let me just quickly reiterate, that's not net profit. You do have to take out the production and marketing cost. But before we delve into that even further, there is an interesting detail with that, and that's to do with the marketing manager, TJ Kasunji, emphasizing the digital sales. So clearly this is something of value, the digital sales. So it seems from this that it's more valuable to companies, and a company like Sony, because it's more profitable than the disc-made units, which obviously there's a cost of the physical items of making the disc, of printing the disc and distributing the disc worldwide. With Horizon Zero Dawn, which was released in February 2017, that had a 35% sales split for digital, whereas with God of War, which was released in April 2018, that had a 40% digital split. So you can see in little over the space of a year, more people, there was a 5% increase in people buying the digital version of the game. And if you compare that, we don't have the figures of course, but if you compare that to what is the likely sales of Sony's big first party games of this year, The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, these two big first party games in a year when there was a pandemic and the use of digital has increased, don't be surprised if digital purchases now make up 50% worldwide. And as the generation progresses, that number is going to increase definitely. And this is why there was a need for Sony to make the PlayStation 5 digital edition, because there is a market for it and it probably is a lot more profitable for them. So together, these two games have generated almost 1 billion in revenue for Sony, and that's quite an incredible figure if you think about it. But it does explain the reason that Jim Ryan and Sony have doubled down on these third-person single-player games, because they are such profitable products. They generate such a big amount of income, and that is of course good for Sony. But it also draws in new people to the platform if there is a perception that that is a good place to get a console, that is a good place to play, because there are so many different varied high quality experiences. And in this time, when there is a big debate about the different business models, which we'll come to, it shows that what Sony's doing, Sony's business model works. You give the audience, the public, gamers what they want. And if we have a look back to a couple of the mistakes that was made with Microsoft during the Xbox One era, and that was that the console owners wanted a new Fable RPG. They wanted a new Fable RPG. But Microsoft, Phil Spencer, greenlit Fable Legends. Now Fable Legends was a sort of multiplayer game, and during playtests it didn't seem to work out that well. There wasn't that much appreciation for it, or there wasn't that much of anticipation for it from the Xbox audience. And another example is Ubisoft. They made the game Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, and this was, generally regarded as a return to form, classic AC gameplay, a brilliant AC game with a pirating theme, and people love the idea of being on ships, going on pirating adventures. So what did Ubisoft do? They created Skull and Bones as a multiplayer game, and before release they then got a sense that it wasn't really going to work as it was, and so they took it back to the drawing board to significantly revise it, and they're still working on it now. So these two games, they show that of course there is an appetite for multiplayer games and games as a service and everything, but you can't force it on a game, and people want single player games. And this is a tactic that Sony have been pursuing, and this is what they've been delivering on. And if you just look at their 3 high profile exclusives from this year, they are The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and Final Fantasy VII Remake. And Ghost of Tsushima and Final Fantasy VII Remake, they've both exceeded their sales predictions. So it's not that other models and games are bad, it's just that this is the predominant choice for most home console gamers, and Sony seems to understand this. So let's take a look at some of the alternative models, business models, and different gaming products that are out there that are competing with single player games. There is also games as a service, GaaS, and these can be highly lucrative for publishers if they find their audience. So if we look at a game like Fortnite, it has been a phenomenal success in a way that Epic would not have even been able to predict. The leading game, the most highly played game, it has become a platform in its own right, and because it's become so universal, so many people are playing it, the amounts of income, it ranges in the billions now. It's phenomenal. Some publishers, they've been pursuing this. You have this with Bungie and Destiny, and it's now developed into this games as a service, and it's become very successful. The problem is there's some services that don't work so well, and if you have a look at Anthem or perhaps Marvel's Avengers, they haven't worked out quite so well. They haven't worked out quite so profitable. In fact, they actually are losing money for their publishers. And then there is the Netflix all-you-can-eat business model, and this is where you pay a single subscription service and you get a series of games included with the service. Now, of course, this is something that Microsoft has adopted with their Game Pass. It has a series of third-party games, but also their exclusive games. And there is now this debate on what is better for the consumer, what is the right choice, and what is right for developers and publishers. And Microsoft, of course, they are marketing their product and they're saying it's best for consumers. You pay a single price and you get all these games included, over 100 games, they're first party games, and it seems in comparison perhaps a real threat to what Sony is doing, because it effectively means that you don't have to pay for a single Microsoft first party game again. All you need to do is buy their subscription. Now of course you will have the recurring cost over the life cycle of the console, but in theory, well, in practice it's actually tremendous value. So why did Microsoft pivot to this new business model? It's all about the exclusive games. So if we have a look just at the past couple of years, for example, back in 2019, the biggest high profile Xbox game was Gears of War 5 and also Crackdown 3. Now Gears of War 5, it was very well reviewed, it's a beautiful looking game. Crackdown Battleground 3, it had been in development since before the Xbox One launch, and it took basically 6 years to release. God knows how much money was invested in the game. In the end, it wasn't reviewed well, and it probably didn't generate very many independent sales. And just this year, and if you look at Microsoft's first-party exclusives for this year, there is Bleeding Edge by Ninja Theory and Grounded by Obsidian. And admittedly, these aren't their AAA games that they're currently working on, but it still gives an indication that these are not of the highest standard. And so whilst many people may have played them using Game Pass, but if they were only to be available separately, it's unlikely they would have gained much sales traction independently. Looking at these sort of games that Microsoft has historically been releasing, it reveals that it hasn't really been able to generate much profit from these games, but these first-party single-player games were few and far between for Microsoft, and so it meant that there was far less opportunity for the company to generate profits from them. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, when speaking about the Bethesda purchase, he said that you can't just build a studio. He acknowledged that it takes time and it takes a culture to do this, and that's something that Microsoft has been unable to do really. And so without having these first-party games, it wasn't able to generate a profit from first-party games. And this is perhaps the main reason that Microsoft had to switch, the main reason that the company had to pivot to a new business model, which is the buffet all-you-can-eat Game Pass model, because it wasn't working with their current strategy. They didn't, at the time, have enough studios working for them. They didn't have enough studios making AAA games, and without the games, then you're not going to get the audience coming to buy them. And one other detail that, looking at the profile, that stands out to me, it's to do with the release dates of both Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War. Now, a few years back, there was a big debate. There has been a lot of discussion by games reporters about the crowded window pre-Christmas season, pre-holiday season, which is when a lot of AAA games are all released around the same time, and it means there is a stronger competition for customers' time and money. And during the summer season, there is a drought of AAA games. And so the discussion was, why don't publishers use their common sense and release their games during a window when there are less other games available? And it seems to be that Sony have picked up on this, and they have been doing it for a few years now, in fact. But let's have a look. At Horizon Zero Dawn, that was released in February 2017, and God of War, that was released April 2018. And then if we have a look at Days Gone, that was released in April 2019, and The Last of Us 2 was originally set for February 2019. So what seems to be clear from all this, because these release dates, they would have absolutely been decided by Kosanji, is that Sony recognizes it doesn't make sense to release their games pre-Christmas competing with the latest FIFA football game or the latest Call of Duty or even the latest Assassin's Creed game. Why do it? There's no point, because you're just putting your game out there when there's more competition. Sony has clearly gone for this strategy of releasing it early in the year when there is a lot less games, there's less competition, and it seems to have paid off for them. From this, we can deduce or perhaps predict that Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, if it's in a decent state, if development is progressing well, I would say this could well be an April or May release in 2021. So to wrap it up, let's have a look at these two games. So these two major games, in the space of their first year of being on sale, they generated almost a total of $1 billion in revenue, $1 billion. And we don't have the figures for The Last of Us 2 or Ghost of Tsushima, but it's quite possible that between the two of them, they could almost generate $1 billion between them. So from a purely business point of view, Sony has recognized if you produce a single player game of the highest quality, that it resonates with an audience, you're going to find your audience, they're going to come to the game, and you're going to be able to sell to them. And if they can do that, just 2 games a year can generate $1 billion in revenue. Imagine what they could do with 4 releases a year. So Microsoft is doubling down with its approach too, with Game Pass. It has brought them a number of new subscribers, and their subscriber numbers have increased. This is including subscribers who've joined with the £1 or $1 special offer joining fee. But we don't know in the long run if it's going to be profitable for Microsoft. It may only be profitable for Microsoft if they are leading the game subscription market, but there is too much competition at the moment for this to seem likely. So these figures from the product marketing manager, they highlight why Sony's approach is so different from Microsoft. So Sony continues to focus on single player games whilst broadening their output, and Jim Ryan has given clues that PlayStation plans to increase the amount of games it releases. And this could be one of the reasons that Sony has exceeded its last gen launch sales with its PS5 whilst its competitor has failed to. So when you've got all these single player games, and in the video game market when there are so many different games being released, that's something that gamers, players value. And it all illustrates why Sony is having huge sales success, because it's delivering what players want. It's a financially healthy sign, which is a very positive sign, and it's a sign that there are going to be many more high quality games to come. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like, share and subscribe, and join me for the next video. Cheers.